I'm Dawn Montefusco, Transformational Writing Coach, and this is the healing power of words. Create with passion and write powerful stories that have impact. And today we have an old friend and a dear colleague who truly, I think, sort of inspired this and doesn't even know it. I just told her that right now. Because when I think about the healing power of words, I really think of Shelley Klammer. She's an online therapist who supports creative women to heal unfinished emotional business from the past. She's also an educator with the International Expressive Arts Therapy Association. Shelley supports women to authentically self-express through spontaneous art and writing practices, as well as to anchor self-safety, self-confidence, and self-love. Shelley, it feels so good to read that and to have you here. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, Dawn. And I totally love connecting with you too, because I kind of consider you one of my writing besties. You're so enthusiastic about writing. And a big part of my world, the main part of my world is art making. As I've mentioned before, I'm an expressive arts educator, but I love to write. And part of my journey with talking to you, I think this might be my third time talking to you, has been just really, every time I just get so excited about talking to you because I get my writer's heart just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And
yeah, I feel
so
really
fun.
connected to your vision of the spontaneity and the healing journey and cross training. I always tell my writers now, we got to cross train more. Like I got a guitar and like I doodle. And I'm like, we forget, like we get stuck in this writing world, and the cross training of creativity is actually quite important. And I feel like you handle that well too. But tell us what projects are you working on before we dive into your amazing book that you put out? Anything going on in Shelley land?
Well, yes. I have, as you know, been scheduling and rescheduling
Yeah.
because I've been in the middle of a move, and I've been just gussying up this book that I've been working on for 10 years long.
Wow.
So it's been a very long journey, and I was talking about it with you last year. It's been a real spiritual growth journey for me to write this book. And so I thought, oh, what a perfect time to talk about it and to finish it. But it's been a challenge because moving homes, as you know,
It looks beautiful behind
yeah,
you.
well, this is my office. This
I
is my
love it.
studio. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. This is my beautiful home away from home. So I've been sheltering in place. Actually, I'm working from home all through the earlier part of this sort of winter, spring. But
Yeah.
last month, it's been so nice
To get out.
to get out, to
Oh,
come down, to walk downtown, to come to my office again. And it's just like my little sacred space. It's
yeah,
so
I
nice.
miss mine. I had just started, a friend of mine remodeled this beautiful warehouse with office spaces. And just as we were starting to build that out and do in-person work, and I was on the board of directors and it was going to be awesome, it's now just waiting for
It's
the
waiting, sitting,
waiting for
waiting.
the next
Yeah.
phase. Which, what's funny about that is I have a intuition. My intuition's been pretty strange since I turned 50, like latent psychic abilities, they say.
Yeah.
And I'm getting end of February. I don't know why I keep getting this like energy that says when end of February comes, things are going to speed up again. And so what I get is that like maybe we'll get the vaccine, maybe, who knows.
Yeah.
But I keep thinking, oh my gosh, that's right. When the world goes back to normal, it's going to feel, I mean, talk about overwhelming. Like that's going to be a lot,
Yes.
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 And this is where I think that obviously we're living in strange times right now. And your new book is the medicine that we need. So I'd like you to just talk about the new Kindle book. It's called A Course in Creative Confidence, which is inspired by A Course in Miracles. So give us the scoop on that.
Yeah, I will. So, I know you like A Course in Miracles, Dawn.
I
Yes,
love it.
because you've mentioned it before. And those of us who've studied it, well, we know it's like a kind of a dense, difficult tome to read.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't start studying A Course in Miracles until I was in my 40s, and I'm 50 now. So yeah, a little over 50, a couple years on you there. But for those of us who know it, it is well, Well, it's written in a very sort of dense, masculine, religious kind of language. And for those who don't know what A Course in Miracles is, it is a famous channeled spiritual teaching from the oversoul of Jesus that aims to correct the mistaken direction that religion has taken since Jesus's life on earth. And it's all around sort of undoing this pervasive belief in religion around sin and guilt and punishment. And so, as we know, as you and I know, the belief in sin and guilt and punishment is what creates an ongoing cycle of outer attack and blame, and also internal guilt and shame in our world. And this prevents emotional healing on a very grand scale. I mean, you only need to look at the news to, to look at all the finger pointing and all the attack and blame, and that creates
to
more
ourselves too.
To ourselves, absolutely, absolutely. And I should mention that I'm not religious at all. I wasn't raised religiously growing up. I didn't go to church with my family. I've never read the Bible, but no religious guilt. I've met a lot of people who have a lot of religious guilt, but I grew up feeling an emotional burden of guilt anyway. And I've since learned really that we all do. So my original attraction to A Course in Miracles was because it was channeled by two psychologists in the
and one was a woman.
One of them was a woman, the main channel, and then she had a companion who was the scribe, which was Bill Thetford. And so as a depth-oriented psychotherapist myself, I was super curious about the emotional and psychological healing information in A Course in Miracles. So as I said, I've been writing this for 10 years. I started writing this 10 years ago, and every year I started handwriting it in my journal, and then I moved it into workshopping it as a course, and then I've since translated it into a book over this past year. So I've rewritten all 365 lessons 10 times.
I love it.
There was a journey to get to these lessons, and there's a real reason why I wanted to do it. And just in my 20s, I was...
Hold on just a second.
Yeah, so I wanted to just give a little bit of a backstory as to how I came to want to even do all of this work, because it's been a lot of work to write all the lessons and simplify them over the 10 years. But it really did start with really recognizing that even though when I was in my 20s, living what the Course would call, my ego dream, I was in my 20s, I fit very well into society. I was a former teen pageant queen. I was a very high-end gallery artist for a time. And I really did actually look very perfect on the outside, but I had very, very low self-esteem, paradoxically. And it was because I was outsourcing for other people's love and approval, and I was not giving any love and approval to myself. So when I turned 30 years old, I've shared a little bit about this with you before, but I call it my self-love awakening. And it was because I experienced a crisis-induced spiritual awakening. 5 people in my immediate family, they died in the period of a year. And during that time, it was a 6-month period, and I experienced my head opening up, like my crown chakra, the top of my head. And I felt complete self-love for a period of about 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah, it was amazing. And however, I was only 30 years old. So given the level of my emotional and my psychological development when I was 30 years old, I couldn't hold that higher state. So when my normal human ego self reestablished itself back into my body and mind, I actually crashed into a very, very deep depression that lasted almost 10 years.
Wow.
Yes. And so it was during those 10 years in my 30s that I started into the expressive arts, because I was longing to open up that uninhibited self-expression and self-love that I experienced during that awakening. And so I delved very deeply into the expressive arts. But I wanted to share a little sort of like the contrast between awakening and depression as I
Yes,
experienced
please
it.
do.
Yeah, because when I was in my awakening period, I barely slept. It was like I had so much energy. I painted all night long. I wrote poetry all day. I danced alone in my living room. It was fantastic. And I had a new baby at the time. So I should have been really tired, but I was, really super energetic. And then in contrast, when I went into that very, very deep sort of opposite depression when I was in my 30s, I was so tired. And the joke in my kindred family at the time was that I would fall asleep sitting up. Like I would be socializing and I would just go like narcolepsy. I would
Yeah.
fall asleep. I just felt so heavy with my human pain body. And so during that time, to help myself stay awake, I started intuitive drawing all the time, like
Oh, wow.
sometimes all day. And during those 10 years in my 30s, I did like hundreds and hundreds of drawings. And I noticed a pattern. It was really, really cool. I observed that I had two minds, and this is why I resonated with A Course in Miracles when I dove into it in my 40s. And so I would always start with drawing my human heaviness, almost like a release
Mm.
process. And so I only drew in ballpoint pen in all those years. And I would draw these very, very heavy, dark drawings about my limitations, my heavy beliefs about myself. And then after I released, I would get a divine drawing, which was very encouraging, and there would be lovely, messages and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so that's sort of how I started to really majorly undo my shadow, or as they say in A Course in Miracles, or as it's told in A Course in Miracles, my ego thought system. I was undoing my ego. So
Yeah.
by the time I started studying A Course in Miracles in my 40s, I really got that concept that we all have two minds. We have a divine mind and we have an ego mind. And so that's sort of my long answer to what inspired me to write the book.
Well, and when you're in those two places, I mean, we, gosh, it's the way you said it. I know Adi Ashanti talks about getting Velcroed. Like all of a sudden we're feeling like, okay, everything's cool. I'm feeling connected. And then I think it was sort of like, like when you go out into space, it takes a lot of energy to get past the gravitational pull. And then it's this beautiful, hanging out above there going, wow, isn't this pretty? It's silent and space. But then all of a sudden you come back into the gravitational pull,
Yeah.
or, he was saying getting Velcroed back in.
Yeah.
And that's the ego, and for me, it's just this freaking constant back and forth where, I use prayer a lot to try to help me ground myself out of the ego mind, which I think a lot of writers get stuck into, which is I'm not good enough. I should have done this sooner. Now it's too late. Everything I write sucks. They don't realize your first draft is supposed to suck.
Absolutely.
You've got the memories as a childhood of people telling you you're no good or you should be better or whatever. And then that's just swirling in there, and I help, people as you, but just specifically getting past the resistance that's inevitably going to come up. And
Yes.
I wonder what it is, in your opinion, what's the fucking point, excuse my language, everyone, because I said cursing was allowed, of this negative Nelly? Why go get out of here, negative Nelly? But
Yeah.
she shows up, and we're in some ways it's about practicing the compassion, because compassion gets you through it all. So in your book, how do you handle those two opposing forces?
Well, I think the major revelation for me was around guilt, because all forms of not good enough
Right.
are strangely,
Yeah.
it's like there's an unconscious guilt around that.
Yeah.
So for me, sort of my healing around really deeply interpreting this course and spending 10 years with it, um, is around healing the heaviness of my own sort of unconscious and conscious guilt, you know? And I realize, you know, since I've been studying that we all carry this unconscious guilt, and it is the root source of all of our emotional pain. And it's the languaging, as you know, of A Course in Miracles is it can be strange to read.
It
It's
is,
sort
yeah.
of archaic in a sense. And so I never really got this concept for about the first 5 years when I was studying it, that I'm innocent. I thought, what does that really mean? You know, I don't get that. But when you talk about how writers kind of beat themselves up, you know, your collective of writers that you work with, for me, I really discovered through the studies of ACIM was that I really recognized and became very conscious that deep down, I thought for some reason I was a bad person. Like I wasn't good enough at this. I wasn't good enough at that. I wasn't loving enough. I wasn't giving enough. I wasn't doing the right things, and, you know, and on and on. And I think for really empathic or creative or emotionally sensitive people, we can, you know, tend to take on too many toxic thoughts, either our own or other people's
I agree
unhealed
with that.
emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, for me, it's always been, I've always taken responsibility for other people's emotions. I started
Yeah.
doing that really young, and it's been a really bad habit to get out of. But it is, you know, a very grave and toxic mistake to take on other people's belief systems, other people's emotions, other people's unfinished emotional business. And, you know, this is because we simply cannot heal ever from the outside. We heal from the inside,
Yeah.
and we only heal when we forgive ourselves, and when you know, for our mistakes, and we forgive ourselves um, for all the terrible things that we say to each other. So for me, I changed innocent to good, and
I love this.
yeah, this can apply to writers as well, and to writing, I think, because I started to say to myself, I'm a good person, or you could say I'm a good artist, or you could say I'm a good writer. And starting to take that goodness and regularly kind of affirm it, for me, that's what melted my emotional pain away. Was just sort of like, in our egos we feel bad. It's the root is guilt, right?
Right.
But
Totally.
we are all good in our soul essence, right? So we
Absolutely.
are good. So to touch into that goodness, it brings that inspiration into the grounded human life, right? It's not to say that in our humanness we don't make mistakes, because from our mistaken ego goals and so on, we sometimes make terrible mistakes. I know I have. And but in order to emotionally heal from that, like, we can always forgive ourselves for our ego mistakes, we can make amends for our mistakes, we can learn from our mistakes, and that's how we can let go of guilt, right? So
Yes, totally. Totally. I
yeah,
love that.
yeah,
You know, it's interesting, guilt. You know, I was brought up Catholic, and
yeah,
I actually was. So I made a little joke about scripture.
yeah.
I enjoy the New Testament. I've always enjoyed it. I was taught by my ex-husband's father, who was a minister, that it was just a library of stories. He'd say it's such a good library of story in his southern twang, and we had a great conversations about it, and how, you know, the feminine isn't represented as much as it should. And he would show me the areas that the feminine was representative, but it depended on the interpretation. And in this, I believe you also take on having more of a representation for the feminine in
Yes,
your interpretation, correct?
very much so. Like, very much more a gender inclusive language, which was just quite affronting to me as I was
Yeah.
trying to study it and find my power and my place in it. So that was one of the first reasons why I started to change all the language so that it was more inclusive. And definitely it is really addressing, well, sometimes what a feminine problem is, typically, is taking on too much for other people, you know, the mother archetype,
Mm.
the feminine archetype.
Yes,
And
yes, yes.
so the guilt that goes along with that is, like, for me, my healing through this course and the writing of this book has definitely been just a spiritual practice of affirming that I'm a good person. And interestingly enough, whenever I do that, it takes me back to that crisis-induced spiritual awakening that I had many years ago. It takes me right back to that place. So for me, it's the medicine. It's like to know that I'm responsible for my healing, you're responsible for your healing. I'm a good person, you're a good person. And just regularly just working with that. So
Yeah.
there's this sort of a feminine tinge to that, I
I
think.
love that. I love that. So you've got these 365, get this right? Because it's a, Course in Miracles, 365 days, and you had to interpret all 365 lessons in a Course of Miracles.
Yeah.
How did it really, or forget about how, can someone read like one of these and use it as a springboard to write about, whatever comes to mind, so that healing process of writing? It sounds like this book could be really helpful for writers to take on one of these lessons and go with it, see what comes up.
Yeah, and it's a simple, the way I've written it is a very, very simple language. And so it started out kind of complicated, like the workbook lessons, the 365 workbook lessons are. And over the years, as I rewrite it every year, it gets simpler and simpler and simpler. And finally, it's very distilled into a very simple form, because my aim is to simplify. I mean, as a writer, what I love to do is I love to simplify really complex, psychological complex, sort of this really complex information for people to be able to take in. So I think I think you could take a lesson and you could work on it for a good long time and then move on to the next lesson. I
Yeah.
don't think everybody's ready to do one lesson after the other every day. It's a lot. It's a lot of information to take in. It's a huge, huge course. It's a huge book in that level too.
I'll vouch for that. I'm on lesson, I'm gonna guess, I think it's 148, but I started it I've stayed on the same lesson for a week,
Yeah, I think
you
that's
know.
wise to do that when
Yeah.
you're working on things. So I think it's wise to sit there. And I write very prolific courses anyway. I have other courses like 100 days of art journal therapy. People get kind
Yeah.
of overwhelmed, and I just say, you know what? Just go at your own pace and take a month on one lesson if you want to. And I think the course is very much that way too.
Talk a little bit about the journal class. One of the things I want to emphasize in this course is that what we write, we don't need to show anyone.
Yeah.
That this can be just for us. And I
Yes.
think a lot of people feel this, I don't know who put it in their head, that, well, if you're going to write something, you better show it to somebody. And that's not true. When it
No.
comes to the healing power of words specifically, and even the stories we tell ourselves or how we want to write our stories in our journals or whatever, tell us why it may be important to keep it to yourself for a bit.
Oh, for sure. Well, that 10 years where I was doing all of that shadow work in my journals, I didn't show anybody at all what I was doing. And so even now I have it all boxed up in my basement, and it's just for me. It's not even something that I necessarily ever want to show to anybody, because some of it's very dark, some of it's very beautiful, but it was just for me for 10 years. I've only been publicly writing for maybe just over 10 years. So I didn't go into the public until I felt like I had, oh, really spent some good time with myself and really got to know myself. So, um, are you talking about the free gift that I'm offering around the journaling
Well,
course,
before we
or?
go to the free gift, just in
Yeah,
general,
yeah.
the you of all people that we've had on the show, I think that it's important for you. I want to hear it from the expert's mouth. People really feel like if they're going to write, they have to show it to someone. Like my audience, they get a little caught up in that.
Yeah.
And what I really want to emphasize in the work you do in expressive writing and expressive creativity is that this is for you.
Absolutely.
And when
Absolutely.
you heal,
Yeah.
you then have the power to create change and joy around you. But it's actually not a selfish thing to
No.
focus on yourself when it comes to healing and creativity.
Oh, very true. I mean, even when you think about this book, I've been keeping it mostly to myself. I've workshopped it to a few people and so on, right? But for many years I just kept it to myself. And so it was for me first to, when I say that I love as a writer to clarify things, well, it takes me a long time to clarify things. So I take
Mm,
complex topics and I like to
yes.
distill them in a way that people who are emotionally ailing can understand, because I feel like, when we're emotionally ailing, it's hard to think straight. We're confused, we're self negating, we're flooded emotionally. So that was me at one time. And so I had to work on that. So part of clarifying this book, for example, was me clarifying emotional healing concepts to myself. And I had to do that very, very much to myself, for many years before I was actually starting to live the writing and starting to embody the writing. And now I'm ready to talk about the writing, and now I'm ready to teach about the writing.
Awesome.
But that was a long process. Like, it was a big, big, long process before it even went into the public eye. So 5 years for sure before I released it in a course form.
That's what I was hoping you were going to say. And thank you for explaining that, because I think that, in my world, that's taken for granted. I mean, in the audience that I attract, it's taken for granted that they don't have to show it to anyone. Sometimes that's the biggest aha they have.
Yes.
When I go, wait, hold on, pause. Why are you showing this to anyone? And they go, oh, I didn't even think about that, because someone had, invaded them with thinking that they had to get it out there.
Yes.
Basic question for you that I really want to ask. Why are words important to you?
Well, kind of what I was just talking about is that I feel a mission to support emotional healing in the world. That's just because I know what it feels like to be so heavy in the human emotional pain body. I know what that feels like. I know how hard that feels. And I just have this passion for clarifying complex information for people who need very simple, pithy, to the point support. And so that's always my mission. I think I started out as a writer very sort of complex and flowery, and all my emotional stuff was getting in there, and and it was like I go back and read it and go, oh no. So as a writer, I'm just a real writer and a rewriter, and distill it and distill it and distill it until it feels like mwah, okay.
Yes.
That's what I want to say, but I have to say I work at it.
Yes. Oh yes. Oh no. This doesn't come out first draft. This is a process.
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Everyone go out and get her book. Course in Miracles is wonderful, but I'm telling you, you gave a few sample chapters a long time ago that I kept close to my heart and was waiting for this to come out. Shelley is a master at, again, distilling kind of complex information into very simple form, and everything's going to be on this page. Look up her classes, look up what she's up to, go check her out. Shelley is healing the world one person at a time, if not many people at a time in her classes. And she also has a really great free gift for us.
Yes. So that, the free gift is called the Dive Deep Art Journaling Course. And as I mentioned earlier, it's kind of a walk through my journals during that sort of dark, troubled period when I was in my 30s and early 40s. And it's it's like in a webinar format. It's pictures of all of those journals, not all of them, it's too many to photograph, but many of those journals from that time. And it actually illustrates what I'm talking about regarding how I would do a dark drawing on one side of the sketchbook, which was really my ego mind and my struggles and my limitations and my self-negation and all the horrible things I was saying to myself right there. And then after I got that out and was able to witness it without judgment, then my higher self had an opening to come through and offer an encouragement. And I went on drawing in that very alternating way for many years. And so the course, it shows that process, and it gives ideas for emotional healing and for starting a 30-day expressive arts or writing practice, and just gives lots of examples of my journals and how I have emotionally healed myself through expressive art and writing. So it's a fun walk.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait. I didn't realize it was that good. I was the pictures, because it's funny when you were talking about those journals. I've only been brave enough to draw in my journals a few times, and recently, and I was kind of disturbed. I was like, whoa, what's that? Like, where did that come from? Because it was something. And then I trusted myself for a few more pages later, and I thought, okay, that feels. But then when you just said that, I thought, I got to go back to that journal because I keep them all. And I want to practice. you really encouraged me. I mean, I just want to say, like, I'm super inspired to really look at this and get your book. I mean, there's so much good stuff to do while we're in the pandemic. Come on, people, we got isolation time. Let's do it.
We do.
Shelley,
And there's a
thank
good time
you.
to finish books too.
Yeah, it's a good time to finish books. It's a good time to, I mean,
start books.
I had every single person on this show say this is such a great time for them
Yes.
to promote and to get it out, because they were stuck going, what am I going to do? Like, I'm kind of this end of summer, early fall thing. So now this is a wonderful time, especially before the fall solstice, to go deep and to get in there and flush some stuff out. And we have Shelley's work, her new book, which again is called A Course in Creating Confidence. And that's available now on Kindle. And also don't forget to check out her free gift and her links on this page. Shelley, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, you're welcome, Dawn. Thank you. It's been wonderful as always.
Oh, I can't wait to do more. We'll do more. Once this thing is over, maybe we'll do something in person.
Yes, that would be great. A writing retreat.
Yeah, totally. Bye. Thank you.
Bye, love. Thank you.